In your talk with Paul's Ego, you mentioned that although a fan of Stanley Kubrick, you didn't like Full Metal Jacket because you don't like war movies. Why don't you like them? Um, I can't tell you with any sort of definitiveness, but I think it's because I find the actual scenes of battle kind of boring. And I know that sounds weird because it's the moment where I really should be somewhat overpowered by the horror of what's happening, the ferocity and senselessness of men killing other men over, disputes that are ultimately probably not worth that bloodshed and that heartache. Um, and yet, it doesn't really interest me. I shouldn't say that I don't like war movies. I think maybe it's more appropriate to say that I don't like battle scenes in movies. If it's two characters one on one, I find that very interesting because that is an individual versus another individual. When I see a war, um, they're not human to me. No matter how much time you spend developing them prior to that, I don't see human beings. All I see is the superorganism. I see one collective fighting against another collective, and the individual pieces of that cease to matter. Now, if I'm reading a book that has to do with war, I don't have that problem. My mind, when you can really delve into the character, then it doesn't matter as much. And even battle scenes can work for me a little bit better if um, it's focused on one character. But just overall, I guess that I just don't feel, what I'm supposed to feel. And I don't. I think there's basically two kinds of people who enjoy the war movies. There's the thoughtful viewer who is genuinely watching to learn something about war. Someone that's trying to figure it out, or that's listening to some message that's being preached by the war film, or trying to learn something about the human condition. And then there's the other war movie fan who just really likes to see people get blown up. And I'm not gonna say that's the majority, but I suspect that it is. And not that I'm totally interested in gore and death and stuff, but I think that when I like that on a more personal level too. I'm much more interested in watching Jason go around and chop girls' heads off and kill humping teenagers than I am watching two groups of rugged men just shooting each other and blowing each other up. Um, and I think another problem is that I don't really typically identify with military characters. I'm someone who personally I wouldn't step on a thumbtack for my country in terms of like we must sacrifice. Um, so I'm probably part of the problem in that respect. But I think people who are too willing to sacrifice for their country are also a problem. So I'm probably just the antithesis that's really no better. But still, I don't identify with military characters. I don't identify with what they're doing. Their actions make no sense to me. I don't see the objective. I don't get it. I don't get the mentality of we're gonna join this group and we're gonna kick the shit out of the other group. It just all that fancy talk about we're fighting for our country and we're fighting for freedom and isn't the flag great? I don't see it, so I don't relate to it. I don't relate to it on any level. So that's why I don't like war movies. Do you sometimes believe that becoming an atheist can strip away some type of moral code? Of course, there is no perfect document depicting a moral code, but through my experiences, I have seen people lose certain perceptions of right and wrong after becoming an atheist. I'm not a Christian, by the way. It's a tough question. There's definitely certain morals that atheists don't seem to abide by after converting. or deconverting. You know, the idea that homosexuality is immoral, for instance, that's very likely to go away when someone becomes an atheist. It's not certain to go away. I have known homophobic atheists, and you know, they're just as bad as homophobic Christians, obviously. But it's likely to go away, or at least soften. Um, there's other things like that. You know, if you're Muslim and you know you believe that it's an abomination to um, you know, eat pork or whatever, you think that's unclean, and you think of left hands as unclean, and all sorts of stuff like that. And you know, and you become an atheist, an apostate. Um, you're very unlikely to still think of pork as unclean. You're very unlikely to still think of left hands as having something inherently wrong with them, um, and have a problem with left-handed people. Um, you know, so certain morality goes away. Um, but more important than morality when it comes to human conduct is empathy. Because a lot of times, you know, what we talk about as morality is really just empathy, institutionalized empathy for our fellow man. Now, most people are not very empathetic. Human beings tend to empathize with those that are similar to themselves. Like I was talking about the war thing earlier. I empathize with individualistic characters because that's how I am. And the more dissimilar a character is from me, the harder it is for me to empathize. And that's, you know, society's problem. It's easy for someone to empathize with someone that they think is similar to themselves. It's very difficult for them to empathize with someone that is very different. That's why, you know, whenever you have a genocide or you know, a massacre or a war, there's always this idea that the enemy is inhuman, that the people being purged are, you know, subhuman beings. It's called pseudo-speciation, where you essentially separate yourself from them. Um, and my friend Howard Blum is very fond of mentioning when we have our little chats the fact that every African tribe has a rule against killing human beings, and then every African tribe's name roughly translates to human being. So, of course, if someone's not of your tribe, then they're not really human, and you can kill them. So that's just human nature, though. I mean, you know, if you look at propaganda films from World War II, and you know, they're unintentionally hilarious now. You'll see us, you know, oh, the Japs, and oh, and Xing Tang Tong, and, you know, very crude, racist Asian stereotypes, and you know, they're very much cast into this light of, you know, not really like us in any way. Their culture is totally different, which, you know, it is pretty different, but, you know, they're not like us in any way. They don't even have our same basic human emotions. They're just, you know, they're just cogs. They're like machine people who are totally unlike us in any way. Just a crude semblance of a human form is all that we share in common, basically. That was the message that the U.S. government put out to the American people, and that's, of course, so that we could do the things that we did at Hiroshima, Nagasaki. You know, let's just, you know, wholesale slaughter, and you know, and you know, before we start condemning ourselves as monsters, we need to remember that the Japanese were doing the same things. They were just as vicious, perhaps even more so. Um, but you know, does giving up God really affect that a lot? I don't think it does particularly. I think that empathy is either there or it's not. I don't think that the God question has a tremendous amount of bearing on that. I think that's why people who are good when they're Christians tend to be good when they're atheists. People who are bad when they're Christians are probably going to be bad when they're atheists. Maybe not necessarily, but, you know, usually. I do think that when you become an atheist and you start to realize that so much of what you believe in um, so much of the morality that you practice is actually based on your empathy and your personal choices. It's not dictated. It actually, a lot of people think it removes responsibility from you, but what I've seen it do to a lot of people is it puts tremendous responsibility on them. It's like you must now decide your own morality. Um, and of course, there's always been this. Sorry, I was just checking something. There's always been this huge concern that if we allow ourselves to decide our own morality, our moralities are going to be hugely incongruent. Oh, this guy might say it's okay to kill, and this guy might say it's okay to rape, and this guy might say it's okay to steal, and before we know it, society has collapsed because it's all just willy-nilly, and there's no sort of organization. But we really haven't seen that in any sort of secular culture. There's always going to be people who do that and say murder's okay. I make my morality. There is no God. Murder's cool. You're going to have people that use that logic. But it's the same people that if they were Christians, they would say, okay, God said I could kill these people, so I can, and even if it was wrong, he would still forgive me, so murder is fine. So you can find a justification for murder anyway. Most people don't want to kill other people. Sure, there's frustrating moments, when you're in Walmart and everyone around you just looks like a fucking slack-jawed idiot and you just want to grab an axe and fucking go to work. But, that's the visceral part of the human soul that hungers for the bloodlust. The reptilian brain having its say, but we don't listen to that brain. At least most of us don't. We have higher brain functions, and we, recognize that we're part of a cohesive society that is very contingent upon certain rules, and we're willing to make sacrifices for that. And one of the sacrifices we make is that we don't, live by the fuck, eat, kill mentality anymore. Now it's just, fuck with permission, eat if you can afford it, kill if the government says so. So those are the rules we're living by at this point. Not saying those are the perfect rules, but that's what we're doing at the moment. Do you tip your waitresses and waiters when you go out to eat? And what is the best or worst time you've had at a restaurant? The best and worst time. Okay. Do I tip? Yeah. Well, you have to tip if you want good service consistently. And I feel like an asshole not tipping someone who's making less than minimum wage. Although, if a waiter or waitress doesn't make minimum wage, the restaurant does have to give them the difference to put them to minimum wage. But I would rather tip them because I don't want to seem like a jerk. It's our culture. I don't tip waiters and waitresses who I don't think were good at what they did because I refuse to reward negligence or bad service. I don't like it when people I'm with tip regardless, because to me that defeats the whole purpose of a tip. It's like, this tip is supposed to be to ensure that you do your fucking job. If you don't do your fucking job, I don't give you the fucking tip. If someone does a mediocre job, I give them about 20%. If someone does an exceptional job, 25-30%. So I consider myself a pretty decent tipper. My main criteria are that my drink be filled. If it sits there empty for too long, that upsets me. That's really about it. I mean, that's really all I expect from a waiter or waitress is just the drink. And, if I ask for something, bring it to me, in a timely manner. I don't blame them if the food takes a while, because usually that's something going on in the kitchen that they had nothing to do with. I don't really give a shit if their attitude isn't that great. I don't care if they're, brusque with me, I guess, brisk or brusque. I don't remember which of those is an actual word that I would use in this situation, but I know one of them is. I think it's brusque. I don't mind if they're blunt, I should say. I'll just use that since I'm not sure about those two. I don't care if they're blunt. I don't care if they're kind of coarse. It doesn't bother me. I know it bothers some people. If it bothers you, don't tip them for it. It doesn't really bother me that much. I'm not really looking to have my ass kissed. I just want to be waited on. That's why I'm at a restaurant. That of course changes if I'm at a really expensive restaurant. Then I'd expect my ass to be fully kissed and my butthole to be suckled with, no restraint, just. And if I, we won't get too explicit, but it's all good. Waiters and waitresses, they're fine. The worst. There's really no great interesting stories about worst or best service. The best service is in the really expensive restaurants with the best staff. The worst stories are when you get a shitty waiter or waitress that doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, doesn't ever refill your drink, doesn't bring you any of the stuff you want, gets your order wrong, etc., etc. We've all had those experiences if we dine out enough. There's no real interesting stories to tell there. Could you describe your transition from libertarian to liberal? I don't think of those terms as being necessarily at odds with one another. I don't think, oh, I was a libertarian, now I'm a liberal. I think I was a member of the Libertarian Party, now I am a real libertarian. My interest is not with labels. I'm not particularly fascinated by being able to explain to you what I believe in one word. That's what a label really is. It's a way to quickly explain something because you already understand what the word means, or you think you do. When someone says they're a Democrat, they're telling you, okay, well, I am a spineless pussy who, believes in this modicum of social progress, and, I occasionally pander to progressives when I must. And then if someone's a Republican, they're basically telling you I'm a crazy religious nutbag who thinks God is telling him how to run the government, and I hate unions, and I hate faggots, and I hate minorities, and so on and so forth. If someone tells you they're conservative, you know that they are, in the pockets of corporations. They favor the rich over any other class. They, even if they're not rich themselves, they want their rich masters to be taken care of. If someone tells you they're liberal, that means that they're probably a fucking whiny hippie that's bitching about language and, the biggest problem in America is people saying things we don't like and, fighting for feminist agendas and, unreasonable amounts of social programs and not admitting when entitlements are getting unsustainable. So I'm of course highlighting the negative aspects of all these terms, but that's the problem with the terms. I mean, there's plenty of liberals who those criticisms don't apply to. I consider myself to be one of them. I'm sure there are other criticisms that do apply to me. There's plenty of conservatives who, they're not necessarily trying to favor the rich. I think their policies or the policies they advocate necessarily do, but they don't view it that way. They think it's going to lead to a greater equality. I mean, they're totally ignorant fucks, but okay. I believe they're genuine in what they say. But I'm not particularly fascinated with labels. I mean, I am fascinated with them as a third party, but I'm not particularly fascinated with giving myself a label so that you can easily understand what I say. I do identify as a liberal because I think things do need labels. I mean, you can't fucking run down, all the ingredients of a fucking dish. Oh, yeah, okay, well, you would pass the high fructose corn syrup, red number 4, okay, you just fucking say Mountain Dew, motherfucker. So we need labels, but we shouldn't, start at a label and work our way back. It should be, well, let's look at what I believe, and then I'll try to, pick the label that fits best, and we'll work from there. And, we can build on it. We can build on your understanding. So what you have to understand about my beliefs is that I am all about the maximization of individual freedom. And I was a libertarian because I believe that they had the ideas that most facilitated that. And I stopped being a libertarian because I stopped believing that they did. And I started being a liberal because I believe that they do. I disagree with the liberals on things like gun control. I disagree with the liberals on things like language control. And of course, there's language control on the right too. Both sides are trying to manipulate the words we use. I don't believe in that. I don't necessarily disagree with conservatives when they say that some of our entitlements are getting bloated and difficult to sustain. But unlike a conservative, my response to that isn't, well, we just got to get rid of them. We got to just abandon this and just cut our losses. That seems to be the conservative idea of how to deal with entitlements. Mine is, let's fix the problem. Let's have a serious discussion about how we can continue doing these programs for the people who really need them. So that's why I'm a liberal. I'm a liberal because I believe that a society should take care of its people, because how can you embrace freedom? How can you embrace the rights that you're given if you don't have the right to food and clothing and shelter and medical care and a stable living, just a stable environment, a stable living condition? If you don't have that, then every right in the Constitution is fucking useless. A man who can't fucking eat, who has no fucking shelter, who has cancer that's going untreated because his medical insurance company has said that the treatment is too experimental. The First Amendment doesn't do him any fucking good, nor does the Second, the Third, the Fourth, and so on. That's useless to him. It's just not. I don't get it. I don't get the idea that everyone just has to take care of themselves. If everyone just has to take care of themselves, then what the fuck is the point of having a society? If everyone just decides the nature of their own little world, and there's no, we can live, sure, free of interference from others. But we ignore the fact that most of the interference from others tends to benefit us. It's not always, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it really is other people coming and fucking with your shit and telling you how to run your life. And we should try to minimize that as much as we can, because that's not desirable to anyone. But a lot of times it's people building you fucking schools and roads and hospitals and fucking putting out your house when it's on fire and, teaching your children and shit like that. So that's why I would describe myself as a liberal. And I would also describe myself as a libertarian, because I do believe in liberty, and it's the same root word for both of those. Liberty. Liberty, liberal, libertarian, liberty. Do you feel like any of your viewers and fans could be smarter than you? How does it feel to be a man with a sense of true logic? I'm sure there's plenty of people that are listening to this right now that are smarter than I am. I'm nothing incredible. What I do is, I don't have a profound sense of logic, I realize. I more just have a profound sense of bullshit. When someone tells me something, I question it, I scrutinize it, I go over it in my head over and over and over again, and I don't really accept anything unless it's so overwhelming that I would be a fool not to accept it. So that's how I live. I live a life of total skepticism. Almost anything I'm told. And it's not always an easy thing to do, because there's a lot of times in life where people will come to you and tell you things that you flat out don't believe. And most of us will just say, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Here's an example. Paul's ego. He's doing a similar question and answer video series right now. Actually inspired me to do it. And in one of them, he was talking about his fundamentalist sister and how You know, she became such a fundamentalist, and he kept arguing with her so much that there came this point where he realized he was going to have to make a decision. Do I want to maintain a relationship with my sister, or do I want to keep, arguing? I can't do both. I cannot keep, speaking my mind to her. I can't keep, so I'm just going to have to start letting this shit slide if I want to have a relationship with my family. And he had to make that decision, and he decided, I'm just going to shut my fucking mouth. I don't think that any of us have the luxury of doing that. I mean, of course we do. We can do it if we want to. And it is the easier thing to do. But I think that it's the wrong thing to do. Because I've noticed that in social situations, like, think about it this, and I'm not meaning to criticize Paul, but I am. If you got two people, and I don't know what the left-right orientation is on this camera, but this is my left, and this is my right. So, if you got someone that's on the left, and you got someone that's on the right, and I just noticed that it's way more common for the person on the left to just ease themselves over to the right a little bit in order to get along with this person. It almost never happens the other way. You almost never see someone come this way. You never see people come to the left and be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go a little left. There's none of this meet in the middle shit. It always seems to be the person on the left that just scoots on over. And the same thing with, it's not just left and right. It's also, logic and illogic. The illogical person, the logical person will scooch on over to the illogical and just, they'll humor them in order to get along with them. I don't think we can do that, because what happens is you end up skewering the whole direction of the country, the whole direction of all of society doing that. Because, when you get this big group of people, they're all going to be leaning towards the furthest most direction of their craziest members. If you got a group of 20 people, chances are that whole group is going to lean right to meet with the right-wing group members. Even if you're a liberal member of that group, you're gonna kind of lean right a little bit to appease them. And, I think the reason is obvious, because it's a lot easier to regress yourself than it is to progress yourself. It's hard to adopt more. It's hard to adopt a wider worldview. It's very easy to adopt a more narrow one. And that's why it is absolutely vital that we do not ever allow ourselves to not stand for what we believe in. So I think Paul made the wrong decision. I think he should have told his sister to go fuck herself. But not my life. But it is my country, and I think his decision is one of the millions of decisions made by people with my values every day that leads to it being more fucked up than it needs to be. But getting back to the question of whether or not my fans are smarter than me. Yeah, sure. But the difference is that I stand by my convictions. I stand by what I think and what I believe. Because I fought hard against a lot of stupid shit. I whittled down the bullshit and found the little gold nuggets of truth. And I'm not going to fucking give those up. I'm not going to let anyone put a little bit more bullshit on there. I didn't carve away all this horse shit. It was bullshit, now it's horse shit. I didn't carve away all this horse shit only to have you come and throw it back on. If we are just biological machines, why does there need to be a driver? Why can't the lights and sounds just cause chemical reactions and be on their way? Well, who's to say that's not what's happening? They say the Buddhists say that self is an illusion, and so do the neuroscientists at this point. Um, it does kind of seem like what happens is we do things, and then we have this consciousness that's merely a result of the things we do. It's not so much your consciousness feels like the driver. That's our illusion, but it's really not. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna raise my hand, so I'm gonna do it. Raising it. It's more like your hand raises, and then your consciousness says, yeah, I'm gonna raise that hand. It basically takes credit for it. Now, the human brain is far from being completely mapped, and we don't really know what role the consciousness plays in the actual decision making. I would suspect it does play some role. Because there have been times in life when I've sat down and reasoned things out, but even so, our very reasoning faculties are just little chemical reactions. These are just neurons firing back and forth, little chemical gateways opening, flooding us with new tides of new and interesting feelings. Does this cheapen it? It doesn't for me. I really don't see... I think people make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, since our emotions are just chemical reactions in our brain, that means that that's all they are. They're just this physical thing. It doesn't. It's like saying that motion is a wheel. There's a difference between the action that's happening and the process by which it happens. Thought is an action, and our neural network is the physical process that implements that action. But I also don't understand why we have to poo-poo the physical. Like, oh, it's physical. Oh, it's just a crude, horrible physical thing. Everything's physical. I mean, the fucking beautiful sunset that you love so fucking much, that's a physical thing. It doesn't detract from its beauty, and I don't think that our brains being physical things, our spirits, if you will, being physical things, the result of physical processes, necessarily cheapens it. I don't have that point of view. What about Marilyn Manson moves and speaks to you? If I may tell you a little something about myself, I was in a deep rut and was driven to deeply contemplating suicide, but Marilyn Manson's music really helped me out and made me feel less isolated and convinced me not to do it. This is not all that uncommon. Art can save us individually. And it's a story that you never get told either. Oh, you listen to depressing music, you're going to kill yourself. Music, that's not how it works. And people that like me and you that listen to Marilyn Manson, we know that. It doesn't have to be Manson. It can be any band or artist of any sort of medium or genre that has that sort of dark or more bleak message. I mean, people have been singing the blues for years. Depression and darkness and a focus on the negative in music is not something new. But it doesn't cause you to feel more depressed. It doesn't cause you to feel more alone. It causes you to feel less alone because there's someone else out there. There's someone that is experiencing the same thing. In fact, there's lots of people experiencing the same thing. What you're feeling is universal. Maybe not totally universal. I mean, like, there's plenty of vapid motherfuckers out there that don't get it, but some people do. Some people have these big wells inside them of unexpressed anxiety and fear and frustration and anger. And knowing that other people have that, knowing that other people are going through the same thing you do, it can be affirming. Maybe not. It's not. Maybe maybe it's not always affirming. Maybe for some people, it just, oh, it doesn't help me at all. But, for me it did. And for you it obviously did. So I appreciate it in the same way you do. I was never contemplating suicide. I'm too egotistical for that. And I realize that my time here is limited. I don't need to hurry the process. If death wants to, stick his fucking sickle up my ass, I'm here. And, I'm sure one day he will choose to do so. So I don't feel the need to help him out. But, I've been in a dark place, though. I have been in that place and seen nothing in the world worth liking before, and then been pulled out of it by art, by music and film and literature and comic books, anything, doesn't matter. Just finding something to identify with instantly makes you feel better because you have an identity, and an identity is very important. If you have nothing to relate to, then you have nothing to identify with. We call it identify with for a reason, because it's something that helps us build upon our own identity. It tells us who we are. That's why human beings invent mythology. To begin with, we develop myths of great heroes to tell us something about ourselves, to tell us something about that noble part of ourselves. And maybe we, invent monsters and demons to tell us something about that not so noble part of ourselves. But it's all a means of understanding. It's a way of coming about, coming into this sort of understanding about, who we are, what our place is. From what I have seen from you on this channel, you seem a lot different than from TAA, almost an alternate personality. I wanted to know if transitioning from TJ to TAA is difficult. Is it like a light switch, something that can be turned on and off, or do you have to warm it up? Also, do you ever find yourself acting like TAA when you're not being taped? Well, in the fairness of full disclosure, I think this is far more unusual for me. If I'm around other people, I am that animated personality. I'm very much doing that amazing atheist shtick for the most part. If I'm cranky, then I'll just be like, yeah, fuck off. But if I'm in a friendly mood, I'm associating with people that I'm comfortable around, I'm definitely very much like the amazing atheist. If you met me in real life, assuming that I would be comfortable with you, which I probably wouldn't. I'd probably just look down, walk away. But assuming that I was, it would definitely be the amazing atheist type personality that you encounter. It wouldn't be this. I don't know why. I guess that this part of me is just something I don't feel ready to share with people on a one-on-one basis. I can bring it out when I'm alone, because right now, even though I'm talking to a lot of people, my mind is convinced that it's alone. A part of me is. The part of me that gets nervous is convinced that I'm alone because there's no one else actually physically here. There's no human being staring me back in the eyes. So the nervousness I have about exposing this part of myself is not really, kicking in. What happened to your 9/11 conspiracy debunk video you said you were going to make? I realized that there is a certain futility to that argument. Because the fact of the matter is that people have chosen their sides. I don't think that it's something that's up for debate anymore. I think you're either a truther or you're not. And there's a very small gray area there. You either buy into the conspiracy or you believe the official story. I believe the official story. I've seen, I don't believe it because I'm like a good little boy who listens to mommy and daddy government. I believe it because none of the evidence I've seen to, try to shed doubt on it has been particularly compelling. Watch loose change and, okay, oh, wow, there's some stuff there. I'm going to do some more research. And then, you do the research and, oh, well, that pretty much kills their arguments. So, you go back and forth and you read the refutations and you read the refutations of the refutations and you read the refutations of the refutations of the refutations. And, you eventually kind of come to the conclusion that the official story is probably pretty much what happened. That's a conclusion I came to. Now, some people, they don't bother with that refutation shit. They just, oh, well, that's the government fucked it and did that shit, and, no matter what you say, it's just la 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 la. And I don't really particularly feel like dealing with the la 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 crowd. I would just be preaching to the choir. And I don't even have a problem with preaching to the choir either, but with this issue, you really gotta fucking do a lot of research. You really gotta put a lot of stuff together because there's a lot of truther claims, and they all have to be refuted. And that takes a lot of time. It would literally be 5 or 6 20-minute videos just going through all their claims and shooting them down one by one. And it's not worth it. It's just not, because you're not going to convince any of the truthers, and most of the people who are on your side are just going to be like, well, duh. And I don't think there's a lot of contention about it anymore. I mean, like, it seems like there's like a whole generation of people now who are really too young to give a fuck about 9/11. So I don't think it really matters anymore. But if you're interested in it, just go watch them. Another reason is there's already so much material. Just all you have to do is to realize why is just go watch the damn loose change guys debate the popular mechanics guys, and it's pretty fucking obvious who the idiots are. I mean, you just watch these two fucking groups of people argue with one another. There's no fucking argument. It's no contest. And I've heard people come back to me and say, oh, I went and watched it, and I still believe in the conspiracy theory. Okay, well, that's fine. You're an idiot. I'm not saying that to be condescending. No, you really are an idiot. You're not capable of rational thought. I'm sorry. If you watch that and you still think that there is a conspiracy, you're fucking stupid. The only even slightly credible conspiracy, and I don't believe this, but this is the only element this is like the only version of events that is not the official version that I think has any credibility, is the idea that the U.S. government or some sect of the U.S. government knew about the attacks and let them happen anyway, because they knew it would shift power a certain way. I don't believe that, but maybe. That one is not too far-fetched. But if you just look in Bush's eyes when he's told the country's under attack, and you just see him sit there for those 7 minutes, just like blank, what the fuck do I do expression on his face, you know he wasn't in on it, unless he is secretly the world's greatest actor. I don't know. I don't think there's no real compelling evidence there for me. How do you respond to people who complain that you're too vulgar and that you give atheists a bad reputation on YouTube? Well, first of all, I'm not really interested in anyone who thinks that they want a good reputation. If you're conducting yourself worrying about what other people are going to think, then you're conducting yourself wrong. You should be about truth. You should be about the truth as you see it, and you should be about, yourself. If you have no identity and you have no truth, then all you have is a representation of something that you don't even understand. You're just putting a puppet up in front of your face and saying, "Hey guys." There's nothing to that. I mean, if you want a fucking puppet, then, go watch. Well, I'm not going to list any of them by name, but, there's atheists on YouTube who are perfectly willing to play the role of perfect model citizen for you. There's plenty of atheists who are willing to pretend that they're the smartest fucking person on the planet. There's plenty of atheists out there who are willing to refute the same tired arguments 1,000 times in multiple part series. And if you want that, you can go check it out. But, I don't even really talk that much about atheism. And I don't give a fuck about atheism's bad name. If I give atheism a bad name, I don't give a fuck. They don't like I'm vulgar. So, what does it matter? I mean, it's like something you say in absence of having a real critique. What did you think about that stuff that the Amazing Atheist said? Oh, it's vulgar. He was vulgar. I did not like the way that he crassly presented that information. What about what he actually said? Oh, well, I guess that was all right. And, if they have an actual argument, they don't like something I said, have a substantive issue, then, they need to realize that that's going to happen. And it should happen. I don't think that, a group of people having disagreements with one another over, various issues is a bad thing. I think that's wonderful. I think that's absolutely the best thing ever. Let's all disagree about stuff. Let's have arguments. Let's have vigorous debate. Anyone who says they don't want that, or that it has no place in the atheist community, is a fucking putz. Who doesn't want discourse? The only people who don't want discourse are the people who are afraid that others will be convinced that I'm right and they're wrong. I'm not worried about other people being convinced because I don't give a fuck if they are. If someone goes around to an opponent of mine's way of thinking, wonderful. I'm not here to convert people. I'm just here to put my ideas out there. And if they're embraced, wonderful. If they're not, whatever. I just have an attitude where if everyone jumps on the bandwagon and says, you're right, TJ, then that makes me feel good because my point of view is being embraced. If everyone says I'm wrong, that makes me feel good too, because it means that I have a unique way of thinking that no one else sees, and it feels like a challenge to me too. It feels like, wow, I really have to go out there and convince these people. I have to make an even better case for why I think this. And I wish that was everyone's mentality, but unfortunately it seems like some people, if you're not with them, you have to be against them. And that's an unfortunate way of looking at things. Do you plan on having children? If so, are you going to curse around them? If I have children, I will conduct myself around them the same way I do around anyone else. I will be my vulgar self. I will say, I will talk to them like adults. I will do all the stuff that I do now. I'll talk to them the same way I'm talking to you. Which is not to say I won't do some of that, goo goo gaga bullshit, but I'm not really looking to infantilize them. But I could just be talking shit. It could be that the second I have a kid, I become a totally different I have a totally different philosophy. So I shouldn't say too much on this, because the more I say, the more I might be embarrassing my future self with my ignorance. I don't know what it's like to be a father, so I really shouldn't talk too much. But I'm not opposed to the idea of having kids, and I'm certainly I don't believe that I'll be against cursing in front of them or presenting them with complex adult concepts, because I want them to be smart. I don't want to have some dumbass kids. I want to have smart kids, and I think you get smart kids. Well, a lot of it's genetic crapshoot, but a lot of it's also giving them things to think about and actually teaching them how to think. Not what to think, how to think. How to be discerning. How to scrutinize, how to question. What is it that Christians say Why is it that Christians say atheists are completely closed-minded when they themselves rely on faith in order to accept one completely unproven God hypothesis? Closed-minded in a lot of scenarios tends not to so much refer to the state of your mind, whether it be open or closed, but it refers to disagreement. If someone disagrees with me, they're closed-minded, which is, of course, something that a closed-minded person says. You can't really blame them for thinking that way because they're closed-minded, so when they see disagreement, they think, oh, well, that person's closed-minded because they don't have an open enough mind to see that they're the ones that are closed-minded. And I'm not saying they're closed-minded because they're Christians. I'm saying they're closed-minded because they cannot see things from another point of view at all. Most atheists do know what it's like to be a Christian. Whether they were one at one point or whether they are like me and they just kind of think a lot about it. I've bred an empathy in myself for Christians. I've examined what's appealing about what they believe. And I try to use that in my conversations with them to dissuade them, to disabuse them of their notions of a higher power. Does that make me closed-minded because I won't? I'm not because I close myself off to being persuaded of God. I mean, I don't do that. I go into every fight. There's there'll be a lot of times where I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'll read a title of some post somewhere, and I can tell immediately that I'm probably going to disagree with it. So before I open it, I sit there for a moment and I let that go. I let all my preconceived notions go as much as I possibly can. I think to myself, I'm not going to prejudge this. I'm not going to decide how I feel about it before I've actually read it. I'm not going to get outraged just by seeing the title of it. And then I click on it. And usually my suspicions about what I was going to think of it usually do come true. But, sometimes a little nugget will slip in and I'll say, oh, maybe they have a point there. Now that's harder to do if there's other people around, I will say. If someone else is there, then I'll impress them by being a badass and discrediting it based on its title alone. So, but that's that phenomenon I was talking about earlier. So I'm not totally immune to it, but I try to be. And that's all you can really hope for sometimes. It's just to try your best to not be the things that you don't like. But some things are just human nature. One last question. Violence has power. Will there ever be a day that violence loses its power? What is your opinion on violence? The people of Libya are finding violence a pretty useful tool about now. Violence has its place. There's people who say violence is never the answer, but that's not that seems like a closed-minded statement to me. To say violence is never the answer. Never, ever? There's no set of circumstances where violence is acceptable. Sure there is. If someone is accosting you physically, you should have the right to attack them. If someone is in imminent threat of harming your friends or your family, you should be able to defend them with whatever you have. If someone is trying to take away your rights, depending on what those rights are, if someone's trying to take away your valuable rights that are absolutely necessary for you to have a free society, violence is necessary. If someone is fucking with you, you should be able to fuck them back. That's I guess what it really boils down to. You should be able to match the violence of those who are violent against you, if you have the capability. Sometimes violence is not an option for retaliation. Like the revolt in Libya, there's much more firepower on Gaddafi's side than there is on the side of the rebels. But violence does have power, and I don't see a day that it will lose it. I don't see how the threat of violence being committed against you will ever lose its persuasive edge. There's a saying, I think it was maybe David Letterman, that said you get more with a smile and a gun than just a smile alone. It might have been Carson too. I don't know. Some comedian said it, but it's true. You threaten someone with violence, they're probably going to do what you say, because whatever you're telling them to do, it's probably more desirable than being hurt or killed. So that's why I don't ever see violence losing its power, unless people at some point in human history, due to evolution or more likely transhumanistic leaps, become immortals who no longer experience physical pain. Then maybe violence would lose its power. But short of that, no. And I don't even think that's very likely. So, yeah, that's I guess the end of the questions video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if I was a little bit too laid back in this one. I feel like I might have been too understated. Maybe I should just kick it up a little bit, but I'll let you guys decide that.